On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to thank the public for attending tonight's meeting. We value the feedback we receive from our residents and encourage everyone to take an active interest in their public school system. Residents interested in speaking to the board this evening are asked to have completed a comment card and presented it to the secretary to the board. When the secretary calls your name, I ask that you come to the microphone, state your name for the public record, and provide your feedback. In order to hear from as many community members as possible, comments are limited to 3 minutes per person for a total of 45 minutes and 3 comments per subject, unless time allows for more within the 45 minutes. Tonight, I will read 5 email comments at the beginning, with students being given the priority, and these will be prioritized in the order they were received. Hello, board members. I'm a freshman in 308, and I'm asking you to please abide by Governor Pritzker's K-12 mask mandate. I say this as someone who doesn't like wearing a mask. I say this as someone who misses seeing my friends smile. I say this as someone who wants so badly to return to a pre-pandemic world. I wish I could hug my teachers and friends. I wish I could sit less than a foot away from all my classmates. I wish we could talk shoulder to shoulder in the hallways, but that's what I wish would happen. As much as I want this pre-pandemic school experience, I want my friends, classmates, and teachers to be safe and healthy over all of that. As much as I want these, I know that when one student gets hospitalized, none of it will be worth it. I know this must be a hard decision to make, but you can't teach science in classrooms and then ignore it when it shares an unfortunate truth. Sadly, the pandemic hasn't ended. Cases and hospitalizations are rising, and every credible health department recommends universal masking in schools. As much as we all want to be back to normal, please make the decision that will protect everyone. Thank you for hearing me out. Hello, board members. I am an incoming freshman in District 308, and I am requesting that you abide by Governor Pritzker's mask mandate for K-12 schools.
So you're just going to read pro mask or what?
I'm reading what was sent in. This pandemic has been challenging and difficult for everyone, but it is not over. COVID-19 cases are recently rising across the states, and public schools are prime places for the virus to spread and infect thousands of children. Going to school in person is the best way for students to learn, but the safeties of those students and the staff is most important. As much as I hate wearing a mask anywhere, and even though I am vaccinated, I am still at risk of spreading it to my younger sibling who is unable to get vaccinated. Schools with students and faculty wearing masks will lessen the risk of spreading it to family and friends who are unable to get the vaccine or getting infected with COVID itself. I miss so much seeing the smile of my friends instead of having to read it in their eyes or being able to hug them without the worry about dying of this deadly virus. And taking safety precautions like wearing masks is the best way to go back to something normal. So please consider abiding by the governor's mandate to help lessen the spread of COVID-19. Thank you for your time. Hello, I am a freshman at Oswego East High School. With the rising concern about the Delta variant and the worrying amount of cases rising, I think it would be best to continue enforcing the governor's mask mandate for our schools. I know some people might see this as unnecessary or useless because we all just came out of a long, exhausting lockdown. But the truth is, until we start to work together and wear our masks, this will be our lives until then. Until we come together, we won't be able to see our friends' faces. Until we come together, we won't be able to travel to many places. Until we come together, we can't move on from this drawn-out situation. So please let us all come together, wear our masks, and fight this virus as a community. Good evening. This is Avery McCohen Robbie, and I am currently a student at Oswego East High School. Below is my public comment. Good evening, my name is Avery, and I will be an incoming junior at Oswego East High School. I know the topic of masking has been very contentious, so I wanted to share some thoughts as a current student. One of the things that all students have learned since the beginning of elementary school were the character counts pillars, two of which are caring and citizenship. If you truly want to dissect the mask debate, wearing a mask demonstrates two of our foundational character principles for our district. We all understand that masks are not an enjoyable experience. However, if you can't be quiet while the process is going on, you will be asked to leave. We all understand that masks are not an enjoyable experience. However, I am an emerging adult wanting to do everything possible to be a strong, supporting SD308 community member. Don't even understand why wearing a mask during a pandemic is even a question on the table. I understand as Americans we fought hard for our freedom, but wearing a mask to get us out of this pandemic will give us back our freedom to resume our pre-pandemic lives. Something we all want. Our world is broken, and we need to teach our children that the only way for us to be saved is to come together as good citizens, not only of our district, but our nation, to care for and protect one another. Thank you for your time.
Jennifer Stamp. Thank you. I would ask that the entirety of my comments be made a part of the official record. My name is Jennifer Stamp. I live in this district, and my daughter is an elementary school child in this district. She is ineligible for the vaccine due to her age. I've also been a lawyer for nearly 2 decades. I want to address constitutional rights and liberties in regard to the enforceability of a mask mandate. As we all know, the First Amendment gives citizens the right to assemble and redress grievances with their government. However, the right to assembly is not absolute. As you stated in your opening remarks, when assembling at a public meeting, the First Amendment does not allow audience members to interrupt, delay, or disturb proceedings. Courts have held that when this occurs, microphones can be turned off, the disruptive audience member may be removed, and the meeting may be adjourned. The First Amendment is also subject to time, place, and manner restrictions. I'm happy to show my ID to verify that it is my place to be here. I live here. This is my daughter's school district. You are my school board. I'm here to address my grievances. I challenge any subsequent speaker to do the same. If audience members are coming here in mobs from other communities to dictate policy, I question whether they are properly placed here. Our local school board is not their government. They have no grievance to address with you that affects their life or their child's education. Through speaking, they are preventing actual community members from addressing their grievances with their government. It defeats the entire purpose of the First Amendment. For persons in our community, the First Amendment is not a shield to say or do whatever you want. There are several forms of speech not protected by the First Amendment, including defamation, fighting words, intimidation, harassment, threats. It's not a First Amendment right to harass audience or board members. It's disorderly conduct. It's a matter for the criminal code and not the Constitution. I would also like to address the idea that COVID is governed by parental choice. It's not a parental choice to determine if a community, as well as its children, are exposed to a potentially deadly virus. It's not a vote we take among parents. COVID safety is the domain of the health department, period. I would also like to address any debate that the governor's mask mandate does not need to be followed. The governor's authority to impose mask mandates was challenged last year by 6 separate plaintiffs. All 6 lawsuits were dismissed in Sangamon County. The court found that it is squarely within his emergency powers, as well as within his powers under the federal and state constitution to issue a mandate. If a school board ignores the mandate, they face liability and accreditation issues. If an individual ignores the mandate, they're welcome to be the seventh plaintiff in a mask lawsuit. And I would expect that the governor will remain undefeated in that lawsuit as well.
I apologize, but your time is up.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Crystal Casper. She's not here yet? Crystal Casper.
Read the name again.
Crystal Casper.
Hello, my name is Crystal Casper. I'm the mother to a sophomore in the district. For months, I've come up here to advocate for parent choice, especially when it comes to masking kids. This past week, Governor Pritzker once again overstepped his authority to issue mask mandates for all schools, including private institutions. I'm guessing the board thinks they're off the hook, which is why there's no agenda item for masks. Well, I'm here to tell the board it's not. Mandates aren't laws. House Bill 2789 has not been passed, giving the governor the ability to make mandates enforceable. This is a fact, and I encourage you to investigate that. Thousands of parents, grandparents, taxpayers, and state reps are all banding together to fight for our children. Manuka board members have maintained the local control, making masks optional, and are considering suing J.B. Pritzker. The Village of Orland Park is fighting back against the Illinois General Assembly to push back and have the governor reevaluate his mask mandate. School board members are stepping down because they don't agree with masking kids, and school boards are waking up and standing their ground to give parents a choice regardless of these mandates. When is School District 308 going to stand up and join this fight to end these illegal mandates on our children? Masks may be causing our children more harm than good. It's not okay for children to be silenced and complacent, to be instilled with fear if they don't wear a mask, thinking they're going to get others sick. It's not okay for my child to have a headache from wearing a mask for hours at a time. And it's not okay for my child to be able to not talk to his friends because they have to stay 3 feet apart. My son doesn't even recognize his friends because half their faces are covered. Tell me, how does this make school a fun place to be? Why would any child want to go to school like this? My son does not want to go back to school if he has to wear a mask. Here are my questions for you that I would like answered to a follow-up email. Are you going to discipline kids who refuse to wear a mask? Are you going to allow mask breaks if needed? What are you going to do when my child or any other child passes out from wearing a mask? Because it does happen. What are you going to do when my kid or any child gets a staph infection on their face or bronchitis from breathing his or own germs for 8 hours? And that too does happen. These are all legitimate questions and liability concerns that can arise from prolonged mask usage. All children are required by Illinois law to have access to free public education, and that is not contingent on wearing a mask. My son will not be wearing a mask to school. He will not be tested for COVID by school staff, and my son will not be subject to unwarranted discipline or discrimination. This fight is not over. I call on the school district to unite with parents, teachers, administration, and do the right thing for our children and fight the governor and his illegal mandates that infringe on our normal school year. Let's retain our mask optional option. Don't they deserve that after what they've been through for the last 18 months? Thank you.
Michelle Klein. Michelle Klein.
I am.
Hi, my name is Michelle Klein. I'm here to speak on behalf of We the People of 308 and also on behalf of Awake Illinois. To whom it may concern, every single one of you. Awake Illinois is a registered 501c non-for-profit social welfare organization supporting constitutional and parental rights in Illinois. We are proud to announce the Awake Illinois chapter has officially launched and is available to meet with community leadership and policymakers to discuss collaboration efforts. Our members include parents, taxpayers, and involved citizens who support our American principles, protections, and liberties. Whether the issues are at the local school board level or the state level, we are organized and paying attention. From rural areas to urban areas, we are actively calling out any forms of government outreach or constitutional violations, especially those that are oppressing our children. From House Bill 2789, the latest sex ed, Senate Bill 0818, and the implementation of device curricula, parents are understandably concerned about their children's education. Additionally, the perception that elected school boards have any role in healthcare decisions or medical decisions is worrisome. We support parental rights regarding facial masks, viral testings, asymptomatic quarantine, and/or COVID-19 vaccination of our children. We implore this school district and administrators to lead and enact policies that maintain the integrity of the Constitution of the United States, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights. Should you be willing to meet and discuss how our advocacy may help unite our community stakeholders, please contact us. Please visit www.awakeil.com to learn about how we are affecting positive change by educating others on these issues and empowering our communities to advocate. We are Awake Illinois, and we cannot be canceled. Thank you. You also all received this email already.
Kyle Clary.
Flags. Hey, Michelle. One second. A little tall. Hello again, public servants. Remember me? Because I certainly remember you. Oh, and Mrs. Johnson, I hope telling everyone that you don't work for them was worth it, because 120,000 people got to see you make a fool of yourself. So keep it up. I want to welcome you all to day 516 of the permanent pandemic. Yes, it was 516 days ago, on March 11th, 2020, that the World Health Organization declared coronavirus a pandemic. And here we are, talking about masks and wearing them, apparently. I just want to let you all know one thing. Hell will freeze over before I let J.B. Pritzker tell me what to do. And I think many of the parents in this room feel the same way. So our governor can kindly pound sand. We don't want to force our kids to wear a stupid mask, period. I mean, do you guys just like to see kids suffer? Did someone hurt you as a child, so is your mission to hurt these kids? It honestly makes no sense why any of you care what any of these parents decide to do with their own kids. Most of these women spent 9 months with their kids in their belly and probably went through a lot of pain and labor. So I think they've earned the right to make those decisions at the very least. But today I need to highlight a very important issue. Last meeting, Mrs. Johnson took her time to complain about someone telling her, you should know what's good for you. Over the past week, I myself have been a target of not only harassment, but threats and physical violence. On August 3rd at a school board meeting, I was charged at and hit by a deranged member of the public and was almost knocked off my feet, while other people screamed profanities at me. The police actually wouldn't let me file a report at the school, so at 10:30 at night, I had to drive to the police station myself to seek justice. After that, I was featured on NBC5, and a couple of days later, I got messages from an unknown number who wouldn't tell me who he is, saying, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And a friend of mine, who was then school board activism herself, on 3 separate occasions had people show up to her home address and throw projectiles at her home with her husband and young children inside. I myself have seen people lurking outside my house. This has got to stop. I am 18 years old. I live with my parents, who are not involved with my activism, and I am deathly afraid not only for my own safety, but for theirs as well. If any crazy person showed up to my home address, and I don't appreciate the news media in Oswego broadcasting what town I live in, or even doing the research to find my home address, Mark Harrington. I have gone to the police stations more time in the past week than I have in my entire life, and it is exhausting. I just want to be able to advocate for children and parents without having to look over my shoulder every 5 seconds or worrying about my safety while walking my own dog in my own neighborhood. Harassing us at our homes, workplaces, or in public has got to stop. Please let's all remember that we are humans and we will disagree, but we have to be conscious of everyone's safety. Thank you.
Joanne Johnson.
Hi, my name is Joanne Johnson, and I'm here to talk about critical race theory. And my husband is actually holding up a picture of our family. And as you can see, our family consists of every color from translucent to coal black. The only thing that matches in this picture is our clothes. And the reason that we did that is so that nobody would stand out. I've taken time to ensure that I've been educated on what critical race theory teaches. Critical race theory is not history. It comes from the opinions, and it uses it to manipulate. It uses history to manipulate and justify the vilification of the white man, as well as to be intolerant of other people's opinions. This is my family. The only colors that matter are the color of our blood. According to CRT, color blindness equates to ignoring the struggles of the black and brown community. According to critical race theory, our white children need to learn about their whiteness and inherent racism. Our white children are the oppressors of their black and brown siblings. Note, my parents actually fled from Greece. I am white, I have white skin, I do not have white privilege, never have. All my dad wanted was an opportunity to be a citizen in the United States and to be able to hold down a job and never take anything but to contribute to his country. Critical race theory teaches our brown children that their brothers and sisters need to help them make it in this world because they can't do it on their own. Critical race theory says that white people are not allowed to be racist because they are not in the minority. Black and brown people, our white grandson who adores their papa is really racist according to critical race theory. They are 9 months and 2 years old. In the Johnson household, our children are taught to show respect to everybody. Our children will respect the law. If they get pulled over, their hands will go on the steering wheel and they will answer, yes sir, no ma'am. Our children are expected to do the best that they can in school and all have straight A's, including the brown ones. All children that have to deal with people that are bad. This is a fact of life. It is not their job to judge the lives of others. It is for them to learn how to deal with the adversity and tough things in life. Our school district shocked me.
I apologize, but your time is up.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you.
Don Schidler. Don Scheidler.
No, I'm sorry, you cannot defer your time to someone else.
Okay.
Okay.
Our school district shocked me with its publication of being racist. I've never seen it in any of the 5 years of my 5 children went through this school. I see our volleyball teams with MVPs and honorable awards going to black children to include gay black children. If you want to teach this hate-infested theory, go for it, but give parents the choice to opt out. This is not history. This is using history to be a victim. My kids are not victims, Joanne's and Kevin's. They are victors. To end this, I'd like to make a statement out last month's school board meeting, 4 things that struck me deeply. 1, threatening emails are being sent. That is wrong, and we as a community are better than that. 2, that the school district doesn't work for us. You are an elected official to represent and fight for we the people. 3, then to sit out a vote when 100% of the parents that came up said they didn't want masks and you sat out the vote. Clearly your personal feelings cannot be put aside for the people who elected you. It may be high time to let someone take your seat. 4, lastly, there was a member who said that they refused to have their child carry that Avid binder because it caused back issues. I agree that it is within your right to do that, but don't then turn around and tell us what we must have our children wear masks when it has been proven that it is bad for their mental and physical health, learning and comprehension, as well as social skills. They have 0% chance of dying. This is less lethal than the flu to our kids. These vaccines have killed more kids than COVID. I was not prepared to speak. I worked in the school district until the mask mandates came out, and then I refused last year, but
Can you put your mask up, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So sorry. I've been in this district for the past 20 plus years. The CRT thing for me is extremely frustrating. I know, I've been in this district and I can say that I have treated everybody the same, and I've never had issues with anybody. Black, Asian, white, Indian, it doesn't matter. You're selling the whole district short thinking that this is gonna improve anything. I think it is just going to backfire. And as a parent of 5 kids that have been through this school district, I think all parents should have an option of what they want their child to do. You know, the lady here that would probably like to have her child vaccinated and can't, that's her prerogative. And there's plenty other people out here who think opposite. I think this is what's missing in America. We need to be able to debate our differences respectfully and make a decision. That's what makes us Americans. It's not tyrannical. We're a republic. We need to start acting like it. We're all adults. Come together, unite, do what's best for the children. Politics aside, get rid of it. Do what's right.
Inga Danis.
Hi, my name is Inga Danos. Dear school board members, the United States of America is an exceptional nation founded in liberty. Inspiring leaders including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, and Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. have demonstrated what it means to be American, uniting people through a common culture of humanity and citizenship that celebrates and respects the individual. A public institution, schools, such as schools, should reflect our American values. Now ask yourself if you agree with the following. Generalization. Should we be teaching children that all white people are inherently racist? Segregation. Should we be teaching children that America is systematically racist country based in white supremacy? Intolerance. Should we be teaching children that you are either racist or anti-racist and that there is no neutral? Conjuncture. Should we be teaching children that white America is inherently anti-black and that all whites suffer from unconscious bias against people of color? Marginalization. Should we be teaching children that the most important determinant of success in their life is skin color? If you answered no to any of these questions, consider how this approach undermines progress towards equality. As a concerned parent, I do not believe that CRT should be in K through 12 education today. This type of teaching will not establish mutual respect. Rather than focus on division, we should promote bringing people together and celebrating the talents of individuals while fostering strong bonds for the betterment of our shared community. Thank you.
Chayla Spears. She's coming. Chayla Spears. You're welcome.
Good evening, my name is Jayla and I'm a senior at OE. This past year, I had a teacher who talked about real-world topics and it kept the whole class engaged. We were able to improve our critical thinking skills and were given space to speak freely in an intellectual environment. I began to develop a real connection with my teacher and classmates because our teacher decided to incorporate things that we actually care about in our curriculum, things that matter. Being accepted was enforced and it made for a better learning environment. I did exceedingly well in that class because my teacher pushed us to do better as students and as people. This definitely has not been the case for all of my teachers. I've had teachers who sat me and 2 other black girls in my class in the back for an entire year and never bothered to learn our names. It made me feel unnoticed and insignificant. I've had teachers who, by definition, bullied students in my class, and I've seen teachers give up on students who needed guidance. Witnessing this treatment of my friends made it hard to learn because I never felt comfortable and I was afraid to ask questions. A simple word of encouragement or acknowledgement of a student's feelings goes a long way. Some students need that student-teacher connection and need to know their teacher actually cares about them. I was told that outside the family origin, teachers are the second most influential person in a child's life. They hold an immense power and influence about how we feel about ourselves. Teachers have a huge impact on our growth, so they need to be held to a higher standard. How teachers interact with students have a profound effect on academic outcomes and how students feel about themselves. That's why we're here in support of the district and culturally responsive teaching. Students want to be seen and supported. When we feel good, we do good. We need teachers to be more accepting and willing to consider our backgrounds while teaching messages that will impact us. Thank you for hearing my voice.
William Sampa.
Good evening to the board and the superintendent. I'm Will Sampa. I'm a senior at 08, and I want to come here tonight to talk about culturally responsive teaching. By definition, it means it's a research and response-based form of teaching, and I think all students, including myself, can benefit greatly from this form of teaching. I'm the son of 2 immigrants, and it's always been very important for me to see representations of myself and my culture and my community. This has driven me to start programs at the library, teaching kids how about their differences and make them unique. I think that message needs to be spread into the classroom. Personally, I haven't experienced this much. I think a lot of our Black history education has been focused around European history. An accurate understanding of this nation's history and an additional lens with which to examine our legal framework can only enhance our understanding of our nation and its current state. Students learn about various events beginning as early as 3rd grade. We learn about the Holocaust and World War II because that information allows us to learn to understand our past and the atrocities and successes. The successes only make sense when we understand all that we have and need to overcome. I believe that diversifying the narrative and immersing students in multiple cultures will provide us with some valuable messages we can learn for life. I can't wait to the future for this district. Thank you for your time.
Asanteva Jones.
Good evening, members of the school board. Thank you for the opportunity to address you on the record. My name is Asanteva Jones, and I live in District 308, and I'm a proud senior this year. This district, like many others around the country, has faced unprecedented challenges, fluctuating mandates, and a barrage of concerns from parents and students. So I thank you for continuing to show up. As a student in this district, it is greatly appreciated. Concerned parents are part of the reason we continue to thrive as a district. Parents of this district unify, organize, and voice their concern. And this board in turn listens. It isn't always perfect, but we're all striving for one goal, the best for every student. This pedagogy is not new to our district, as addressed with our Diversity and Equity Committee since 2008. We know that culturally responsive teaching, not to be confused with critical race theory, are attributes of excellent educators. Cultural responsive practices foster high expectations for students despite negative stereotypes, fosters critical thinking skills and inquiry, and most important, a safe environment in which a student can engage and grow. It also fosters a healthy student-teacher relationship. Overall, my experience at the school has been positive. A specific instance of this was when an English teacher I had for 2 years during my freshman and sophomore year pushed me more than any other teacher. She was the first of my teachers to expect more out of me than I expected of myself, and I have high expectations of myself. Throughout middle school, I was able to go through school, barely engage in class discussions as long as I continued to get an A in the class. This changed with this teacher. The class environment she had allowed students to flourish. She made it feel comfortable to ask questions. She did this through little things like taking the time to pronounce every student's name correctly, and also through bigger things like holding every student to the same expectation. Through her making sure the class fits each student's individual and cultural needs, students can reach their full potential and feel welcomed. This is not the standard. I've had more than one teacher who would not call me by my preferred name, Asantwa, because it was too hard to pronounce. Oftentimes, people of color are allowed to fall behind because of preconceived notions. I've once been referred as the whitest black person that person knew. The reasoning was because I was nice, quiet, and intelligent. Having this said about me as a child confused me. At the time, I associated these traits as an aspect of my identity, not as subverting racial stereotypes. Why was academic success not seen as something that could be associated with people who looked like me? Cultural responsive teaching emphasizes having high expectations for every student. I want to say thank you to Ms. Tuneman because you have demonstrated what excellence in practice feels and looks like. This is why I'm in support of continued cultural responsive teaching and training in the district. Thank you for listening.
Andrew Nicholson.
Thank you, members of the board. As we know, Will and Kendall counties have been classified as high transmission areas, with cases going up in Will County 141% over the last 14 days, cases going up in Kendall County up 198% over the last 14 days. We remain at only 48% fully vaccinated. So now that Governor Pritzker has implemented the mask mandate, parents are looking to school boards to make sure that the mandate is implemented and that you do not give in to uninformed denial of science. This isn't about opinion, and this isn't about asking you to honor the request. It's about doing what is required. 4 things to keep in mind. My mask protects you, your mask protects me. So if somebody doesn't wear a mask, I'm the one who's at risk. Schools that don't adhere to the mandate are opening themselves up to liability and sanction. The state of Illinois has the right to remove funding, and insurance companies have the right to remove coverage from schools that refuse to comply. The virus does not care about political beliefs. You should not care about them when you are defending children from it. And lastly, you don't actually work for the parents. You work for the school district, and it's your job to do the right thing for the school district and the people who go to school, either to learn or to be taught or to teach. I'm going to tell a little story. My 8-year-old went on a play date on Sunday, and he was almost at the door when he said, "Oh, wait, I forgot my mask." And he ran back inside. I forgot it. His mother forgot it. But he was like needed an umbrella because it was going to rain. So he came back in to get his mask. And when he came home later that night, he told his mother and myself that they had gone into a fast food restaurant. And he said, "And I wore my mask." And I said, "Did you really?" He said, "Of course I did, Dad." It's the same way that children have been talking to parents about stuff that they think is obvious for generations. Kids do not have a problem with masks. Parents have a problem with masks. Pediatric ICU departments all over the country are getting overwhelmed. Children are getting COVID, and even when they do survive, they're experiencing greater side effects, something called the long COVID. As part of a layered approach, including social distancing, sanitizing, and vaccination, masks are safe to use and work to protect kids from COVID when everyone uses them. Please do not give in to the anti-science agenda. Protect our children. Thank you for your work for our kids and our schools, and if nothing else, this meeting has taught me that we need to push to make public education more available to everybody. Thank you.
Harry Jackson.
Hello, I live in the school district. My kids are graduated now, but both went to Oswego East. But I'm here as a concerned citizen. Concerned citizen for our school children, a concerned citizen for the community at large, because of the spread of COVID, and especially right now with the spread of the Delta variant, which is much more aggressive, much more contagious, and as most of you probably know just from following the news and keeping up, is rampant again across the country. And it seems to me that a lot of people in the room, I'm sure the board knows this very well, but a lot of people in the room don't seem to realize this, and that their decision, well, they think their decision as a parent is to make the decisions for the health care for their children, but think about how this affects the rest of the children in the school district, and that's your responsibility, is to protect them. And it's not just about their individual child, but it's about all of the children. This is a very, very contagious virus, and possibly deadly virus, even for kids actually right now across the country. It's affecting a lot of children right now. There's children across this country that are hospitalized. There's children that are on life support. It can happen. But it's not just that. It's the fact that this is a virus that you can have, that you don't even realize you have, that you don't have symptoms. Your child could have COVID, could be not feeling symptoms, could spread it not only to the other children in the school, but to the staff in the school, to the employees in the school, to the janitors, to everyone in the school, and then bring that home, spread it to the family, spread it to other community members. And this is where what I think we're really missing, is that this is about the collective, of us as a community, us as a school district, us, as a school here at Oswego East, is to protect each other. And the simple fact of wearing a piece of cloth over your face in order to protect people, where's the humanity? Where's the caring about other people and the effects that this can have on people with immunocompromised health issues, and we just don't know what this can do to the individual child. And why take the chance, and as a board, why take the chance on a child getting this and possibly dying? It's very serious.
Thank you. This will be our last comment for the evening.
Zoe Borman?
Hi, I'm Zoe Wehrman. I'm an incoming senior at OHS, and some of you may remember me from 2 meetings ago when I urged you to require masks. I was going to get up here today and urge you to require masks again for my safety, but today I stand urging you to consider this for the future. Consider the fact that the CDC had to recommend wearing masks to keep me safe. Consider the fact that none of us have a choice but to go to the school district. Consider the fact that this virus is deadly. Why did it take a state mandate for masks to be required? Well, I couldn't tell you that. But the truth is, I don't care what all these parents do in their free time. They can take their children to playdates without masks and run around speaking against masks all they want, but they don't get to endanger my safety. This school district is where I learned to speak for myself and where I learned to fact check my sources. This school district is where I learned exponential growth, which has become a very relevant topic during this pandemic. This school district is where I learned biology, which taught me how dangerous pandemics can be. One person's constitutional right ends when it negatively impacts the health and safety of others. 2 meetings ago, the message I received from the school board was clear. The message I received was that one child's discomfort wearing a mask is more important than my physical safety when receiving an education in a building where I'm required to go. I've been called fearful, and I can assure you this isn't fear. I've simply been well educated, an education I received from this district and my community. and education that I am now using to say, consider our safety when formulating safety plans this year. I've heard these parents cry to give them their power back, that it's their children so they get to say what they wear. As a teen girl in this district, I can say the school already tells me what I can and can't wear, and that these parents never had the power due to the dress code. If you can make me put on a sweater, you can make everybody wear a mask and follow proper safety protocols. Ultimately, your job is to keep the district running, and now your job is also to keep the students safe. So please, keep me safe this school year by maintaining proper safety protocols throughout the year. As long as COVID is raging, we need to continue requiring masks. Thank you to all the board members who have had to put up with threats and harassment. You didn't deserve that, as you are simply trying to do your job. But please don't cave to public pressure. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the right voice. The safety of students is the most important, and one student hospitalized would be one too many. As many of these parents have said, they love their children. In that case, they shouldn't want their child hospitalized from COVID or potentially dead. Please listen to the students who have to go to school and who care about keeping people alive. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. We now move on to 5.1 board member comments. As many of you know, the board members had a retreat on June 26th to start the year off right, with the majority of the board being new. Our IASB representative provided a training, and during this training, she asked each of us to write down what we wanted our legacy to be at the end of our term. I thought these statements would be helpful for all of you to hear, so I'll read a few of them for you now. This board sought information to be prepared for discussions, thoughtfully considered administration's recommendations, and collaborated respectfully to make decisions in the best interest of students, staff, and the school community as a whole. Compassionate advocates for all students and staff. That we set an example to our students and community of how to work collaboratively, how to work through problems from multiple perspectives while respecting each other's opinions and ideas. This board was a caring governing body who listened to community input in their decision-making process, which led to an educational environment where kids feel safe, cared for, and prepared for what comes next. Created a culture of professionalism, integrity, and equity. Created a team that included all stakeholders working together for the best interest of all of our students. Brought our community back together. Had a top-rated and sought-after district. Proud to be a BOE member representing the community, proud to work here, go to school, and graduate from here. We develop systems to create and maintain a learning climate that values all individuals while simultaneously creating a sense of community. We cared and were fair. Our governance aided in creating an educational environment that is inclusive of all community members. They did what was right and what was best for current, future students, staff, and community. The district is positioned for growth and for everyone to reach their maximum potential while in the district and beyond. Among these statements, you will notice common themes of collaboration, community, and doing what is in the best interest of our students. Please know that this is what is in the hearts of every person who sits up here tonight. We want to work with one another, not against one another. And most of all, we want to provide the best world-class education possible in the safest environment possible for our children. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So we move on now to the superintendent report.
Well, good evening, Board. Tonight is our last regularly scheduled meeting prior to welcoming back our staff on August 16th and our 17,000 plus students to the 21-22 school year. The summer has been an extremely busy one as we prepare for the upcoming year, and I am looking forward to the school year beginning. I have often said that schools are just bricks and mortar without the students and staff, and I know I speak for everyone when I say how much we are looking forward to the upcoming school year. Last week we held a two-day orientation for our new administrators. Our new administrators spent time with our district leaders in professional development, and we also held a retreat for all admin last Friday at Murphy Junior High. One thing I'd like to thank the Oswego Rotary for choosing School District 308 as one of their service projects this year. Last week, Rotarians and different community members came together to clean all 142 of our District 308 buses. So I can now say that our buses are waxed, they're gassed, and they're clean from top to bottom, and they're ready for kids on August 18th. So as you can see, there's a lot of things happening in School District 308 as we get ready for the 21-22 school year. And that is my report for this evening. I'll have more later.
I motion for approval of consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 6.1, minutes from the July 12th, 2021 Board of Education meeting, open and closed session, and 6.2, acknowledge the FOIA request received by the district.
Second. Mrs. Simulton? Aye. Dr. Marino?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson?
Aye.
Mrs. Croner?
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Item 7.1 is financial statements. Are there any questions regarding the information that has been provided to the board this evening? Item 7.2 is in regards to driver's education vehicles. Dr. Petsky will present at this time. Dr. Petsky?
Thanks, Dr. Sparlin. All right, well, I'd like to present to the Board of Education today just a little bit of history on what we do with our driver's education vehicles. And I'd like to talk about the challenge we had in January when we went to bid for our vehicles and a proposal that has been designed to help us meet that need. So starting off on our first slide here, you can see our current practice. We currently rent our driver's education vehicles. We rent them for about $675 a month per vehicle. It comes out to for 6 vehicles, 3 at Oswego High School and 3 at Oswego East High School. So 6 total vehicles for $48,600. So if you did want to look at this in terms of a lease cost, like a 3-year lease, that would be like $145,800 over 3 years. In addition to renting the cars, or even if we were to lease the cars, we would be responsible for the maintenance over those 3 years, and the maintenance cost comes out to about $6,480. Now, back in 2014, we've started renting these vehicles, and in 2018, we released a bid to find out if we could replace our vehicles. And when we released that bid, we had no one respond to it. So we engaged with our current car dealership, and we just acquired 6 new vehicles and again began renting the vehicles. Now that lease is up. We did go out to bid, or not the lease, but the renting program is up. Now we did put out the bid. We were given 3 bids from 3 different dealerships, and we chose the lowest bid, and we started negotiating with the sales team for those vehicles. And when the finance department found out that we were leasing the vehicles, they said no, because they don't want the liability with leased vehicles they don't want the liability of leased vehicles being used in the driver's ed program. So we reached out to our other bidders and told them the same situation, and they too, they were not comfortable with the finance department honoring a lease. So we went back to our current rental agreement and our local dealership, and they said that they weren't interested in considering the rental program either. So that left us with looking for another option. And fortunately, there are some out there. So if you look in the next box here on the right, the proposal is we've engaged with a fleet management company, with Enterprise Fleet Management, and what we're looking at is doing what's called an open-ended municipal lease. And so they will lease the vehicles to us. The cost for that lease is $48,366. It would be a 3-year program. This program would include maintenance, so we wouldn't have an additional cost there. But what's nice about the fleet management system is at the end of the 3-year term, Enterprise will work with us to either sell the vehicles and give us the equity, which would amount to about $26,826 at the end of this lease, or we could roll that equity into acquiring new vehicles. So it gives us some options. So in addition to that $26,826 in equity, we get also the maintenance cost and the difference between the two leases in the program. So we would actually be saving about $11,336 a year, or about $34,008 over the 3-year term. There we go. And just if you've got a question about bidding or not bidding, are we still within the realm of what we can do? Because we did bid this out, we do not have to go out for bids to compare this. But I do want to mention we are a member in what's called Sourcewell or E&I Public Sourcing. These two groups are memberships in these. Enterprise actually won contracts for them, so they can acquire vehicles for us at a co-op purchasing program price. So we are assured that we are getting low prices on the vehicles that we are engaging in this contract with. So that's something I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about later too. There's other purchasing options with these co-ops as well. So let's look at the complicated screen just so I make sure everyone knows what we're talking about here. So the first thing, let's look at the thing that pops out, and that's the 4 squares in kind of the lower left. With a fleet management option, we can actually choose to do one of 4 things. We can either buy the cars right now outright, which is called the self-funded or the cash option. We can finance the car, we can buy it on finance terms to 0, and we can own it when we're done. Or we can do a closed-end lease, where we lease that vehicle for 3 years and we give it back, and we don't have any equity in the vehicle. Or, and the reason there's a star above that last option is that's what I would recommend that we do. There's an open-ended municipal lease. And what that means is we would lease the vehicles, and if you look at that spreadsheet up top, the lease vehicle would be $671.75 per vehicle per month. And then at the end of our 3-year term, we could give Enterprise $10,500 for each vehicle, and we could buy it. Or we could lease it, we could lease that $10,000, or we can give the cars back to Enterprise and say sell the cars. And they're telling us that the expected value of these cars when we're done with them will be $15,000. So when they sell the car for $15,000, they're going to keep their $10,000 that they put into the car, and they're going to give us the difference, which in this case would be $4,471 per vehicle. So can you see how on this open-ended municipal lease, we get $26,800 in equity at the end of this. We can then take that $26,000, we can then acquire 6 new vehicles and apply those dollars to that lease. So instead of paying $145,000 over 3 years, we can subtract $26,000 off the top. So we're saving a little bit more money. So it works to our benefit. And that's kind of all that this screen says. And the last thing I just had in here is it does include a vehicle maintenance program, so we would not be paying extra. So where we were renting the cars for $675 a day and then doing maintenance, this allows us to for $671.75, build that maintenance in. So oil changes, any manufacturer recalls, or any warranty repair work that has to be done. We take it into any of these 37 maintenance centers around our area, and they take care of it, no problem. And what I didn't opt to do is I didn't do the tire replacement and the brake replacement, because after our 3-year lease, we're not going to have that many miles on them to justify replacing tires and brakes. So we can trade them in, get new vehicles. And that, my Board of Education, is how 308 will work with Sourcewell to partner with Enterprise Fleet Management for our driver's education program. And if you were curious, there's a picture of the 2021 Nissan Rogue that we would be acquiring. So I would be happy to entertain any questions.
Do they have 6 Nissan Rogues for us? 'Cause
They do.
I see a lot of empty car lots.
Yeah, there's a lot of empty car lots. The one nice thing about the dealership, Enterprise, has a nationwide selection. So as soon as we tell them this is the option we want to go with, they will get the vehicles for us. And our other car dealership has been kind enough to allow us to use our current vehicles until we acquire the new ones.
Is there a fee to be a member of Sourcewell?
No, great question. There is not a fee. It's just a matter of signing up for it, and then it's just keeping track of what purchasing agreements they have, and if those truly are the best prices, or if we can get better pricing other places.
And, and are you familiar with other districts who are using this fleet management service?
Not for their driver's ed vehicles. So some other districts are purchasing their vehicles and choosing to do other things, but I can certainly reach out to other CFOs and find out what they're doing. But I do know the few that I've checked with, they purchase their vehicles and they keep them, which unfortunately, with the maintenance, that you kind of take a chance when you buy your cars.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
Is there any difference in our insurance coverage when it comes to the lease option versus what we're currently doing of renting?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. I don't think there is, but I will double check with our insurance provider just to make sure. But I would think that leasing would be more in our favor than renting. So if anything, I think it would be more in our favor to have the lease option. But I'll get that information for you as well.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Pexey. Any other questions? All right, very good. Item 7.3 is an annual item in regards to updating the membership of our Board of Education advisory committees. The board chairs have gone through the applicants and are recommending the new members to the Finance Committee. Are there any questions on this informational item? All right, item 7.4 is in regards to board policy 7:165. This policy needed to be amended as we approach the new school year. The suggested changes have been approved by the board's attorney, and if there are any questions, I'm sure Maureen would be happy to answer them for the board. All right, item 7.5 is in regards to our district safety plan. Tonight we'll share several highlights from our comprehensive safety plan document. The safety plan serves as a guide to the operations of our district amidst the pandemic, knowing our highest priority is the health and safety of our students and staff. Over the past several weeks, our area, like others across our state, has experienced a rise in COVID-19 cases. Due to this and the increased presence of the Delta variant, the governor issued a mandate that all persons in pre-K through grade 12 schools wear a mask to help slow the spread of the virus. Aside from the mandate, having our safety plan in place is important, as it addresses several other topics aside from masks. Additionally, once the board adopts the plan, it will be in place to guide the use of masks in our schools when the governor's mandate is discontinued. As we have stated throughout the pandemic, we use guidelines of local, state, and federal health officials to create our plans and our policies, but also retain enough latitude to adjust in response to the individual needs of our schools and our community. As you hear more about the plan moving forward this evening, it will be clear that we have included many layers of mitigation to protect students and staff and create a safe environment, while also doing all we can to keep students present in class where we know they learn best. The information shared tonight, along with the full safety plan, will be available on our district website for parents to easily reference. So with that, Teresa Comitas is going to present the safety plan. Teresa?
Thank you. We'll just go over some of the highlights. As Dr. Sparlin mentioned, this is a comprehensive document currently at 21 pages in length. We're just going to go through some of the highlights this evening. The components of this plan remain subject to change based on guidance that we receive from local, state, and federal authorities, as well as in response to any of our own or area trends in regards to COVID-19. There were several guiding principles that we utilized as we put this plan together. Of course, the number one priority for our district always has been and remains protecting the health and safety of the students and staff in our buildings. We did reference local, state, and federal guidance that has been provided to us in order to develop the plan. It was also important for us to develop a plan that was both feasible and flexible to adjust to the community and school needs and risks. And of course, we want to maintain in-person school for all students to avoid missed instructional time related to illnesses or exposure. We pulled a couple of pieces of the CDC guidance out here this evening. The first being in regards to transmission rates within schools. Multiple studies have shown that when multiple prevention strategies are in place, that those rates are typically lower than or similar to community transmission levels, which leads to the second one, which is that together with our local public health officials, our administration will be considering multiple factors when they make decisions about layered prevention strategies. As we make these decisions, we know that they also impact our surrounding community, so we want to do what is right based on our school population, families, and students, as well as the surrounding community. To begin the school year, there are a number of mitigation measures that we already have planned. These are discussed in detail in the safety plan, but I'll just take you through a brief summary of a few of them here. Cleaning and sanitization will still be occurring on a daily basis. We have a number of resources available to do full disinfection in our buildings each evening. We will still be encouraging hand washing and respiratory etiquette as far as trying to minimize the transmission of droplets when someone is coughing, sneezing, etc. We will also have hand sanitizer in each of our classrooms as well as in common areas throughout the building. Our ventilation systems will continue to be running at the maximum air exchange that we can in order to bring as much fresh air into our buildings as possible. Our classroom layout will be so that we can try to minimize any germs between students within the classrooms. We'll discuss that a little bit further when we get down to the social distancing component, but certainly not prescribed at the level that we saw last year. And we no longer will have one-way hallways, one-way stairways, and pathways throughout classrooms. We do have visitor and volunteer procedures in place. You'll see as we get further in this, that's tied back to metrics. So where there's higher community prevalence of COVID-19, we would see that be a little stricter than when we see the numbers lower in our community. We will also have masking tied to metrics. We'll get to that a little bit further in the presentation. But as Dr. Sparlin said earlier, this is really a plan that's important for us to adopt for the school year. Regardless of the current mandate that we have in place, we want to make sure that we have this plan underneath. So if that were to expire, we know what our plan is as a district. Following the guidance of the Illinois State Board of Education and Illinois Department of Public Health, as well as the CDC, we will continue to promote the COVID vaccination as a primary mitigation measure. Social distancing, we'll walk through that in a little bit as well. That looks a little different in the guidance from federal and state resources this year, dependent upon masks. It's a little bit more flexible. We're looking more around the 3-foot distance as opposed to what we talked about last year with 6-foot distancing. We'll also continue to have PPE available to our staff and to our students who are not able to obtain it on their own. This could include face shields, face masks, gloves, gowns, etc. Okay, So our metrics that we utilize when we're developing our plans and reacting to our local trends are really calculated over time. So there won't be 1 or 2 days of a sharp increase or decrease that we would be reacting to as far as any changes based upon metrics. We'll be evaluating all of our metrics in 2-week intervals. We'll be utilizing the 14-day average of new cases per 100,000 population. And to do that, we're going to be utilizing the 4 zip codes that most of our students originate from. So we won't be utilizing an entire Kendall County number. We actually have done a deeper dive into the location of where our students come from, and the 4 zip codes make up our primary service area that we'll utilize in order to measure those metrics. For any of our metrics-based mitigation, so things that we either add on or take away in response to our local health situation, would be announced no later than the Thursday prior to the week where any changes would go into place. The only exception to that would be as if we're responding to an urgent situation, an outbreak, etc. There could be things that happen a little quicker. We will be reporting our metrics both for our district like we did last year, as well as a link directly to that 4 zip code service area on a metrics page of our website. This chart goes through a few of the metrics-based mitigation measures. I discussed a number of mitigation measures earlier. Not all of those are tied specifically to metrics. These two, both masks and visitor volunteer restrictions, are. So the CDC, which was endorsed by our local and state health authorities, have broken down risk into 4 categories: low, moderate, substantial, and high transmission. You can see that the metrics for each of those 4 categories are across that first full row there, and that is again based on the new cases per 100,000 population. So again, the governor's mandate that is in place at this time is what the district is following in regards to masking. However, if that were not in place, the metrics-based measures would be once this plan is adopted. So at low transmission rates, masks are recommended for all persons aged 2 and above, but not being mandated within our schools. When we move up to moderate, we have kind of a hybrid in place here, where masks would be required while students are in areas where they're moving or areas where they can't socially distance. So as we think about arrival, dismissal, passing periods, those kind of places, everyone would be masked. But once they're seated at their desk or their learning area and they're not up and about and they are able to maintain that social distancing, masks would no longer be mandated while they're in that specific spot. When we move into the substantial and high transmission areas, we would then require masks on all persons in our schools, much like the policy that we are following at this point in time. Our visitors and volunteers are also, the restrictions are based on what the zip code areas metrics are. So we do not anticipate any additional restrictions on visitors or volunteers in any way when our community is in low to moderate transmission stage. However, we would begin to bring in some of the restrictions when we see that move into a substantial transmission stage. So in that case, we would be encouraging for meetings to be held virtually if they could be, or held outside of times when students are in our buildings. When we move into the high transmission, we would be having our essential personnel in buildings while students are present and wearing masks in order to minimize the exposure of people in our buildings outside of the student population while the students are present. What we've done is built sort of a bank of additional mitigation measures that can be utilized in response to the local community health situation. It is important to note that each of these is to be considered individually, and each of these are responses to the current situation and the possible transmission sources in the population that we're talking about. So these are not specifically tied to a certain metric or a certain population. And it's also important to note that these can be both added and taken away in response to the spread or potential transmission within the schools. At this time, none of these additional measures that are up here are being considered within our school at this exact time. These are things that would be layered as a response. So these could include optional screening testing, which would require parental consent, required testing for high-risk sports and activities, which could also be dictated by our sports association, IHSA. Limited movement within our buildings, meaning that we would have like specials teachers maybe not utilize shared equipment or shared spaces for music, art, those sort of things, but try to come to where the students are to limit the movement throughout the building. Capacity restrictions in large gathering spaces, use of barriers when spacing is difficult, so this is like the plexiglass, temporary dividers that we have from last year, and then masking in certain settings. So if we were to see a spike or an outbreak within a set population or a certain area, or while a certain activity is taking place, it may be that masks would then be required within that specific setting, as opposed to a blanket rule across the school. Another significant change this year is the reporting of illness within a student or staff member. The full list that's up there are the current known COVID-19 symptoms. There have not been any changes to this list from the end of last school year. The list is pretty long, but anyone that is experiencing any of these COVID-like symptoms, it is recommended that they get tested for COVID-19 and that they seek their healthcare provider's opinion on a potential alternate diagnosis. So unlike last year, we would not be having each person report and then tracking the number of days that they, from the time that the symptoms were onset through the time that they come back. However, for each person that is ill, we'll be providing a very comprehensive list of recommendations from local and state health authorities, which include being tested and consulting your healthcare provider for an alternate diagnosis. And without either of those, an individual should be away from school for 10 calendar days. And they should also be fever-free with improvement to their symptoms before they return to school. So we will still be tracking and reporting illness, but not issuing specific quarantine dates for someone that calls in sick. We also have a lot more latitude in regards to quarantine options after a known COVID exposure. All of these options are subject to direction by our local health department. What that means is the local health department has the ability to come to us and say that given the current situation that we have within our local community, they are no longer endorsing a specific shortened quarantine and we may have to move to a different category. Without that guidance, the one all the way to the left, the 14-day quarantine, is kind of what we were used to last year, the more traditional quarantine, where there's no presence at school or school-related events, no testing required or anything. From the time of the known exposure, the quarantine is a full 14 days. The next option, moving right, would be a 10-day quarantine, which again is no presence at school or school-related events on that 10 days. Testing is recommended for someone completing a 10-day quarantine, but not required. Beginning at this section and moving all the way right, all of these would require that a mask be worn by that individual while they're completing the remainder of the 14-day quarantine, even though they're returning at day 10, as well as social distancing be maintained. Moving right, the next option would be a 7-day, which again, no presence at school or school-related events for those 7 days, but that quarantine would end at 7 days, but it would require that a PCR test on or after day 5 of the exposure be done prior to the return to school. The final right is the new test to stay strategy that is outlined in our state guidance. What this allows is for students to remain in school even after they are a known exposure to a COVID case. There are several things that must be in place in order to utilize the strategy. It is only applicable when we are in a universal masking. So as long as masks are required within a school setting, a student who is exposed to a known case of COVID-19 may remain in class and not miss any time away as long as they are tested throughout that quarantine period. It is recommended at day 1, 3, 5, and 7 following exposure. This is not a required PCR test. This would be any of those approved tests that we currently are utilizing in our state. So this is a big difference from last year. Many of our students that missed time away from class were it was due to a quarantine of a known exposure, and in this situation, as long as masks are in place, students would be remaining in class and not missing time. This walks you through the process of what happens when we do receive a positive case from a student or staff member. Anytime someone tests positive for COVID-19, they are required to complete a 10-day isolation period. That clock begins from the first day after the symptom onset if they are experiencing symptoms, or the day after the specimen was collected for those not experiencing symptoms. It's also important to note that return must include resolution of the fever as well as improvement in the other symptoms. If someone tests positive for COVID-19, vaccination status does not negate the isolation requirement. So regardless of vaccination status, someone that tests positive would be required to complete the full 10 days of isolation. Close contacts, which are defined by the state as those who are not fully vaccinated, would be required to quarantine per the IDPH directive, which is outlined in full in that previous table that we walked through. It's important to note that in addition to those who are fully vaccinated, there's also a second category underneath that for those who have experienced a COVID positive case within the last 90 days and can demonstrate the presence of antibodies. They would also not be required to quarantine under that same guidance as the fully vaccinated individuals. For each positive case that's reported to the school district, we will utilize our nursing staff to conduct contact tracing and notify close contacts, and we are also required to report this back to our local health department. We'll discuss a few special settings in school. These again are addressed, and this is a summary of what is covered within the state guidance. For our elementary settings, our lunch spaces will be 3 feet between students. At the secondary level, there will be some flexibility for choice, and we will offer socially distanced lunch spaces for students that wish to be seated in those areas, as well as traditional lunchroom seating for students that would like to sit closer. We'll also be cleaning the surfaces throughout the lunchroom and the lunch serving times as often as feasible, but we will have sanitizing wipes and hand sanitizer available for student use in those areas. Driver's education, masks are required. That is part of the federal travel mandate, but students will also utilize hand sanitizer before and after and wipe the shared surfaces in the vehicle prior to leaving. Band and choir, we have the preference that outdoors be used whenever possible. When we are in the high-risk category, we will ask our students to utilize the bell covers over their instruments, as well as the special masks that are in place for playing instruments. We would be encouraging as much distance as possible and wherever possible avoiding shared equipment. Our athletics will be following the school mitigations in regards to mask. So wherever we're at within that metric-based table, our athletics would be following the same, as well as possible required testing within the high-risk sports and limitation of spectators. As I mentioned earlier, that is our plan, although we may receive additional guidance, restrictions, and direction from the IHSA that we would need to comply with. So that is a brief overview of the safety plan, which has been shared with you in its entirety, and I am here to address questions.
Teresa, first off, very well done. Thank you for walking us through the highlights of the safety plan. It was very well laid out, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Will it be available on the website? I see people taking notes. When will it be available on the website?
Yes, so this summary will actually should already be on the website for review, and the full safety plan in its entirety will be available prior to board approval. for review and will be on our district website once it has been approved by the board.
Thank you.
Yes, Lori.
Okay. Great job. I know how hard this has been with a constantly moving target. I know that you are putting in about 27 hours in each 24-hour day trying to get this information correct, accurate, and out. And I appreciate it. So thank you. I do have to wonder about page 11, which is lunch. I'm real concerned that we're offering choices of traditional lunchroom seating for students so they can sit closer than 3 feet. Okay, so do we have enough seating in our secondary schools, that's junior high and high school, so that every student can sit 3 feet apart? If every single student chose to sit 3 feet apart, can we do that? Do we have that availability?
It was the plan as part of the administration's approach to determine by asking parents what their what their choice for their student would look like so that we could react to that either way. It's not as easy as just saying, do we have space? What would happen is in our buildings, we would need to open up non-lunch spaces as lunch spaces, which of course then require supervision as well as a number of other mandates from the state in regards to food service areas. So access to sinks, running water, drinking water, etc. So we built those spaces based on what parent feedback is in regards to the option.
I guess I'm going to need more information on what was the parent feedback on this. I think I'm hearing the answer is no, we don't. So what happens, I guess my question is one, what happens on day one if 90% of the students say, no, I want to sit 3 feet apart? Are we prepared for that?
Faith, do you want to specifically address that lunch thing?
Sure. So I know that the high schools have been contemplating making sure that they have additional spaces and additional staff, especially the first couple of days, as to do the overflow or what that would look like. If it's 98% of a particular lunch, it will be a challenge the first couple of days as we figure all out what that would be, but we're already preparing of what that would look like if that scenario played out, and have already said that we would be able to hire additional staff to what's needed to keep that going.
So who will keep track of which students have sat 3 feet apart at lunch and which have not, as it relates to your quarantining process of having to maintain that social distance of 3+ feet until your 14 days concludes?
So a lot of this is the issue of the guidance, the way that it would be presented to the students, so that we would say this is what is expected, and then we'll do what's feasible within the district as far as being able to track and trace the movement of the students that are in the building. When we're under a universal masking mandate, it's a lot easier because then we aren't, attempting to figure out what rules look like, per student, so to speak. But there is a lot of it that relies on us providing the requirement according to IDPH, much like the local health department would do when they call and provide that guidance to someone that's under a quarantine, but not able to, within, what's feasible and what's not, for us to be able to track the movement of a particular person throughout the day. The reason we looked at this a little differently for elementary versus secondary is the amount of time that they're actually seated next to somebody. These lunches, by the time they get to the space, especially because we have to utilize multiple spaces for lunch, by the time they get to a space, get a chance to sit down and actually remove the mask to begin eating, it is very unlikely that they would have more than 15 minutes with anyone within that close contact. It is also specifically addressed in the FAQs that were released today by IDPH and ISBE in regards to social distancing in cafeterias. Again, it really talks about the feasibility of utilizing the physical space as much as possible, but again, understanding that it is not required. It also does discuss in here specifically that there is not a need for students, teachers, or staff who are vaccinated to distance while eating. So again, as students make that decision, if someone is fully vaccinated, they are not under any sort of even guided restriction on social distancing.
So I guess what I'm asking with this, just, I'm thinking I need to clarify, just what I'm hearing is, and I'm trying to just be abundantly clear, my child goes to the first day of 6th grade, and generally speaking in junior high, they're given a week to settle into a space, and then that's their assigned seat for the rest of the quarter, right? On Monday, they decide they want social distancing. On Tuesday, they decide they don't. The next student wants to remain in school, so they need 3 feet of social distance. Will they be allowed to switch their assigned seat? Will they not? All of these things are almost guaranteed in my mind to be reasonable questions that will come up in some rather short-staffed lunch periods. So I guess I'm not sure who to direct the question to in terms of staffing for this, but this just seems offering these choices pretty continuously, and I'm assuming at high school you can choose day by day. This seems like kind of a headache and a mess. And I'm just not understanding what the process will be for a parent that really wants to encourage their child to do the right things and wants to quarantine and wants to do the things the way they're supposed to, whatever their choice is on a vaccine status. Can you help me understand that? I'm not sure which
So
that works with.
the statement in regards to those that want to quarantine, I do think it's important to note that if somebody is identified as a close contact, that option to take the full 14 days out of school is most certainly there. We are not enforcing that anyone come back sooner or submit to any sort of testing or anything to come back earlier. Faith covered a couple of meetings ago what that temporary distance learning looks like, but they will be offered that temporary remote education for when they are out of the building. So, and we would not be forcing anyone to come back while they are on a quarantine. We have prior to this being released, we walked through exercises with each of our buildings to understand what the available space looks like for lunches and what our furniture capacities and everything looks like so that we could accommodate. Initially, we were kind of panicking at the 6 foot, but it was released at the 3 foot. For elementary and, as you mentioned, junior high, we will know who is seated where on a daily basis. That's an assigned seat. Once it's assigned, it remains that way. At the high school level, again, that would be the flexibility of having both the socially distanced as well as not socially distanced seating. And again, it's important to note that the social distancing of 3 feet, and this is outlined specifically in the guidance that came out this morning as well, that it's mouth to mouth 3 feet. It's not 3 feet of space between individuals. So it really, right. So really, like, your mouth to someone else's mouth may only be 10 inches or a foot of space between, your shoulder to shoulder area. So
I'm not questioning that. I'm merely questioning the piece of student choice on whether or not they choose to be socially distant. And I'm a little concerned at the fact that what I'm hearing is, depending on how many students choose that they would like to be socially distant at lunchtime, they might not have that option.
No, not at all. We would make sure that we maintain enough spaces so that if it was chosen that every single student there would certainly be. It just means that we would have more spaces as lunch as opposed to the cafeteria. Yeah, we certainly can accommodate the choice of anyone that chooses to socially distance during that lunch hour. And the time period that they would be exposed while actually seated to be able to remove the mask and actually eat, depending on the number of spaces we have to utilize, would become shorter, the more spread out we are.
Thank you.
I have a question about lunch as well, and this may be a question for another meeting, but I'm wondering what lunch is actually going to look like. Mm-hmm. Like, are they going to have, get a lunch menu and your choices are, a cheeseburger or a pizza or salad today? Is this a sack lunch? I'm assuming not the same as last year's sack lunches, which is a lot of things you could take home and then eat later.
Go ahead.
Do we have that answer?
Yeah, hi Ruth. So I've been working very closely with Patty and Jessica in the cafeteria And what we're going to do is we're going to have lunches that are kind of grab and go, but there's still an option with some of the like an orange or an applesauce, or if they take milk and things like that. But we definitely are going to limit the options. It's not like a free-for-all lunch, and we're going to start with those grab and go options.
Okay. And will those grab and go things be posted as a lunch menu so my kids can be like, no, I don't want a ham sandwich today. I'd rather just bring something from home.
Bring something from home. Yeah, we'll have a lunch menu with that as well. So,
I had another question about the quarantine options. As usual, it's a little confusing. So there were 4 different options. How do we determine what option we're using? Is it like if...
So
yes,
some of
thank
this
you.
is choice based on the individual subject to the quarantine. The difference between day 10 and day 7 is that you would be required to test at day 5 or after to come back at day 7.
Okay.
So if somebody says, no way, I'm not testing, they would be subject to the 10 days. The difference between the 14 and all the other options would be that if we were in, for example, the low transmission, and so masks were recommended but not required, that the return of coming off of quarantine early would require a mask and social distancing be maintained until day 14.
Okay. My question about the test to stay, I have a couple of questions. One is in regards to students who are asymptomatic and they receive a false positive. Like, what if you're exposed, you test positive on day 1, you have no symptoms, can you test again on day 3 if that's negative? Like,
so the rapid tests or any school-based testing, if someone tests positive, the recommendation is that they go out and get a confirmatory test before it's a true positive.
Okay.
If, using your example, someone were to test positive within our school, we certainly would record that positive, do the contact tracing, and move forward with having that student begin the 10-day.
But as a parent, I could then take them somewhere
absolutely.
to get the PCR
Yes.
that's more accurate.
A confirmatory, yep.
And
absolutely.
then who's paying for these tests to stay rapid tests? Am
So-
I paying for that? Or?
No, the state of Illinois is offering testing without charge to any district in the state. They offer 2 different forms of that. One is the SHIELD program, which is a saliva-based test where students would spit into a small tube. Those are collected with a barcode that we would know which student that ties back to. Those are taken to a state lab where they're tested. The results are then typically available in less than 24 hours back to the parents. The other option is the Binex, which is the same test we were utilizing for athletics at the end of last year. That is a nasal swab, but it's not the real deep nasal swab. And those are rapid done. It's a card. The sample is taken and then put in a card. There's drops on it, and we know within 15 minutes as well. Both of those can be administered, tested, and reported back through the SHIELD program. So it is our intent to have a relationship with that program that would allow for us to offer testing at least a few days a week within our buildings. Again, it would be parental consent required, and it wouldn't be required that the testing be done by the school. If someone would prefer to use their doctor's office or pharmacy or somewhere else to get the testing done, that's certainly allowable. And it's rare for us to kind of know on day 1 about the exposure, so the guidance does discuss that as quickly as you can kind of get on that testing regimen, with the focus really being around day 5 and day 7 of that exposure, when it's most common for those to be read on the tests.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
They answered it.
And these quarantine options have nothing to do with whether they are vaccinated students or unvaccinated students?
They do. So quarantine in and of itself, the definition of a close contact, as long as someone does not have symptoms, if they were a close contact to a known case of COVID-19 and they are fully vaccinated, or they have had a confirmed case of COVID in the last 90 days, or can demonstrate the presence of antibodies, then they are not subject to quarantine as outlined from the IDPH.
Okay.
So this is only that all of those were not factors, and then we would kind of come into this scale and determine based on both whether or not masks are used universally, as well as whether the family chooses to want to have the child tested depending on which day they are coming back.
I have one more question then. Does this SHIELD program also cover the antibody testing or only?
Nope, it is a screening testing program that's utilized. The primary purpose of the SHIELD program is to identify asymptomatic cases within school settings where there could be challenges to physical distancing and or consistent mask and other mitigation measures employed. Some schools are utilizing it, and we've had some conversations with them as well. It doesn't mean that it needs to be utilized school-wide for all students in order to have that in place in our school. We may utilize it, for example, in our high-risk sports population, or have it there for the optional testing, but this would not be something at this time that would, even if we begin that relationship with SHIELD, would not be something that is being offered to all students and staff on any sort of regular basis at this time.
And the 14-day option, that is really just for families that prefer that option, or if we had gotten to a situation where we were no longer masking or social distancing?
Correct.
Is that correct?
And additionally, it does require that, so dependent upon what the student's activity level might look like, there could be restrictions on extracurricular activities if they're choosing not to test and those sort of things. So the true definition of close contact is still 6 feet or closer for 15 minutes or longer and requires a 14-day quarantine. What the guidance that came out from ISB and IDPH and CDC specific to school settings has done is attempted to put the focus around how to keep kids in classrooms and to prioritize in-person learning ahead of some of that. So while they're not willing to say that there's no risk in coming back at day 7 or day 10, when we employ these other mitigation strategies, whether that's testing, social distancing, or masks, that really reduces that risk significantly, and that the presence of the student physically in the classroom would be a priority.
And I do have some concerns that while we're insubstantial or hot, that we're giving this lunchtime option to secondary students, because we're saying that they have to be masked all the time, but then in the one unmasked situation that they are in school, we're saying go sit with your friends.
Again, some of that was based on the guidance that says that fully vaccinated do not need to distance while eating. So we are not requiring that to know who is and who is not vaccinated, but we are allowing the opportunity for someone that is vaccinated to not need to follow the rest of the considerations here. It is very
If you want to be able to stay at the meeting, you're going to have to be quiet. Okay. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Again, the district is not asking for vaccination status and will not be seating students based on their vaccination status. That is a choice of students to choose. We will have the opportunity for students to socially distance for those that wish and those that do not.
And yeah, all that I'm saying is that since we're asking for masks, they're mandated, that seems the most high-risk time to then have that choice. And I know that we run into all kinds of issues with spacing and
absolutely
staff and everything, so I'm not trying to be
ignorant
absolutely.
To that. The guidance does acknowledge that.
Uncomfortable.
It definitely acknowledges that and openly states that that is likely the most challenging time for schools is meal service time, but again, we're asked to prioritize the presence of students in school all day, every day, and that we should maximize our physical distance wherever possible. But but again, to remind us that while it's recommended that physical distancing be at least 3 feet, that it is not mandated that there be 3 feet. So again, I think we are not alone in that struggle and what spaces we can put students to eat. And again, going back to what are some of those requirements in order to have an area serving as a cafeteria in regards to access to water and hand washing and the services and all of those kind of things that play into that as well. But going back to Mrs. Doyle's initial concern, we certainly have the capacity and ability to accommodate any student that would wish to have that minimum of 3 feet at the secondary level, and we would have that choice beginning at the junior high level. But at the elementary, there would be at minimum 3 feet between each student.
And did you say that students will have to choose their seat for lunch in order to?
Junior high does maintain assigned seating charts, so we'll know where they're at for each lunch period. That is not something that we do, and is not something we believe to be really feasible for us to attempt at the high school level, to know who is seated where. There's a little bit more, there's quite a bit less time for that, and getting them through the line and even to a space to attempt to eat something is very quick. And so any additional measures that we were to add into that would take away from the time that they have to eat. Okay. So again, it's that unfortunate and not ideal balance between what we feel is safest compared to what is feasible for us in order to have students attending full-time in our buildings.
I have a question about staff, since you guys were just talking about staff. So we have some staff in our buildings who are not vaccinated, right? A, it's not our intent to force this, correct?
Correct.
And then B, I know that last year there was, I'm trying to remember what it was called, this might be a Maureen question, but if a staff member goes out on the quarantine?
It was the COVID days, is that what you're referring to?
Is that still, or is that no longer?
No, it is not.
Under FFCRA?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that expires September 30th, even if you had extended it.
Correct, yeah. So that, again, the quarantine would only be required if someone was closer than 3 feet when we're in a masking situation. And then even given that, they have these different options. So if they were to test to stay, they wouldn't miss any time away. But any time that is missed would be their normal accrued sick leave time available to them.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Teresa, what about mass breaks?
So we are encouraged started at our last administrative retreat and encouraging our staff to, when weather is appropriate, take things outside. So, flexible seating options, a gym outside, anything that we can do to try to kind of offer that, that time away from masks, in addition to, of course, the lunch time, and then temporarily, removing them for a drink or, eating at any point in time. That is all certainly allowable. So we are encouraging staff, and we hope that while weather is nice, we're seeing classes taking advantage of that. Masks are not required outdoors. We are utilizing our playroom spaces and our playground spaces and having recess time for kids without masks.
Great, thank you.
Question in regards to the sick leave. So I think I heard you mention that it would end. So if a teacher was sick, is there any additional consideration for the number of sick days they currently have, given that we're in the middle of the pandemic, or is it the same number of sick days and they would likely exhaust them if they were out on a quarantine?
It's the same number that they have. The teachers also have their own sick bank as well, that they can ask for additional days through their union.
And one last question, the great gator versus mask debate.
So that was discussed in the FAQs that came out again this morning. It does say that the CDC doesn't recommend gaiters that have a single layer of cloth. However, a single layer folded over to be a double layer, or an athletic gaiter type of face covering that's 2 layers or more are considered acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
So it's really just a two-layer regardless of what the face covering, if it's the mask with ear loops or a athletic gaiter.
Any other questions for Teresa?
I just want to say thank you so much for
You're
all the
welcome.
hard work that went into this. I know I had the opportunity to see it many times, and it was just, you did a lot, and it's great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are all the information items for this evening.
Okay. Let's move on to action items. Can I get a motion for action item 8.1, approval of bills for payment?
I make a motion to authorize the payment of bills in the amount of $7,467,808.86 as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson, Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Can I get a motion for item 8.2, approval of rejection of bids for cooling tower project for the Wheatlands, Thompson, Bednarsik, and Oswego East High School, and rooftop ductwork for Oswego High School?
I make a motion to reject all bids based on the cost being significantly higher than the estimate.
Second.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye, and thank you,
Dr.
Jen, for
Marino,
that.
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Can I get a motion for 8.3, approval of new Finance and Facilities Advisory Committee members?
I make a motion to approve the new Finance and Facilities Committee members as discussed and presented.
Second.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
You guys got some really great people on there, by the way.
Thank you.
I like those names.
Can I get a motion for 8.4, approval of amended district administrator contracts?
I make a motion to approve the amended district administrator contracts as discussed and presented.
Second.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Can I get a motion for 8.5, approval of amended building administrator contracts?
I make a motion to approve the amended building administrator contracts as discussed and presented.
Second.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Can I get a motion for 8.6, approval of new building administrator contracts?
I make a motion to approve the new building administrator contracts as discussed and presented.
Second. You guys are slacking.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Can I get a motion for 8.7, approval of personnel report?
I make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Dr. Marino,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mrs. Croner.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.